Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Detection Engineering Dispatch. I'm Alex, hosting all of your DE content and bringing you the very latest in the DE space. So if you enjoy our content and you want to stay in the loop with it, you can join us live on here on Zoom bi-weekly, or you can catch the replays on our YouTube channel and now available on Spotify. Now, today's episode is going to be on a particular topic that is probably keeping a lot of people up at night. And if you guessed ransomware, you're not too far off, because it can definitely lead to that, right? But we're going to be talking about insider threats. Now, whether they're malicious or they're unintentional, right? These threats obviously can cause some pretty serious damage, and they usually kind of slip under the radar, and it's usually too late by the time we get to them. So with us today to unravel a lot of the complexities with insider threats is none other than Miss Rebecca Blair, who is the renowned author and very seasoned professional, and very soon director of her own security operations center, and author of aligning security operations to the MITRE attack framework, which I have my own signed copy here. She's joined us on Dispatch today. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us on Dispatch.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely an honor, and super passionate, obviously, about cybersecurity. And I know we have some good stories lined up for this. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm so thrilled to dig into this with you. I always like to ask a little bit about you, about our guest, how you got into the industry, and really like what keeps you excited about what you're doing, because these kind of things keep us really busy.
Yeah, I think like anytime I work in incident response, it's almost like an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
You kind of get in that moment, and that's really where you kind of prove your value, especially when it comes to like IR and SOC, is when everything's quiet, people kind of forget you exist. And then really in those high pressure moments, kind of everything's on the line. And so that's just always very exciting. And just every day is literally a new puzzle. It's one of those fields where you constantly have to keep learning about new threats that are coming out, new models, new tools. And so it's pretty hard to be complacent.
No, absolutely. Uh, Spot on there. I am really excited in particular to talk about this topic, because just having our audience and our listeners who are predominantly to level set, they're predominantly like incident responders, they're detection engineers, they're building the detections to protect their organizations. Hearing from someone like you, what are some of those best practices to protect ourselves against malicious or unintentional insider threats is going to be key. And so a little bit to give y'all the rundown, I reached out to a few contacts, a few colleagues in my past life, and I asked them to submit like radio show style, like the craziest insider threat stories that they've heard and they've come across in the front lines. And I've got some pretty good ones here that Rebecca and I are going to just kind of go back and forth about, where they've submitted their horror experience, and she's going to share like, oh, like what should they have had implemented? What kind of rule should they have thought about, right? And it's who better for it to come from than an expert, right? Like yourself. So before we get into those, maybe we can talk about maybe what is an insider threat, and in terms of like the definition, right? Insider threats are, by SANS, the definition of SANS, are the potential for individuals to have, or maybe unintentionally have, unauthorized access to an organization's critical asset. Now, whether it's malicious or unintentional, it's going to affect the organization in a negative way, right? This is kind of the SANS Institute definition of it. But Rebecca, would you say that this is like, does this resonate with you? Is this kind of the definition that you've seen in the field?
Yeah, I kind of like the breakdown of victim, accidental, negligence, and malicious insider. I think, especially when it comes to like negligence, like the policies thing is big, especially in organizations where you might be development heavy. I have quite a few friends who have worked for startups where you have people leaving the company who just want to take the code base, and they thought they're just taking it for examples down the road, but stuff like that isn't necessarily malicious, but obviously would be against like the policy aspect. So
Yeah, and it comes in different forms, right?
yeah.
Because it can be as simple as that somebody was a victim of a phishing attack and they didn't know that it happened, and but all of a sudden they're the insider. That was the vector that they took.
Mhm.
It can be maybe somebody configured something wrong, right? Like this example, like the wrong cloud configuration, which happens a lot. It can be sharing passwords, tale as old as time. And then, of course, someone having a motive to actually, having the access that they have. I think they're the most. They're the person that could inflict the most damage if you have certain access to the company
Mhm.
and you're already from the inside. Now, I wanted to give a shout out to the insider threat report from Securonics. They released the last time they released a report like this was in 2019. So there was some very interesting statistics that have come about since 2019, and also specifically around insider threats. And that is the fact, and that's just really around how difficult insider threats are to detect, right? Because 90% found that insider attacks are actually more challenging to detect than any other attack, external attacks, or literally, quite frankly, anything else. And that is up 50% than the survey in 2019. And obviously we've had a whole pandemic and we've had all these things happen, right, in since then, but that's pretty insane that it's up 50%, and it's still one of the hardest attacks to detect.
It's not super surprising though, right? If you think about the distributed workforces, so a lot of people can have the ability to work from anywhere. And so we'll see if that shifts back with a lot more RTOs. But so if you're thinking about areas where you can detect on of based off of locations, well, somebody might just be working while they're on vacation or something for that week. And so there's a lot of different changes, I think, out of a kind of working society that have made it even harder to detect, where a lot of times to be able to detect it, it could just come down to either kind of user-based analytics or sometimes just like your spidey senses.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say the biggest challenges in finding this are? Like for someone that doesn't have those spidey challenges, I mean,
Yeah.
there's got to be controls in place.
Yeah, for sure. You could definitely have some controls in place, but a lot of it also comes down to your organization. A lot of SOCs right now, or at least the ones that I've seen and friends that manage them, are so busy working about like the external threats that are coming or the misconfigurations or things like that, that unless it's something that, inherently kind of triggers off a malicious alert or something like that, they don't always have the most amount of time to look internally for those threats. So that's where you either have to have really good detections or to be able to kind of take a look at, what type of transfers are happening, what type of external emails are happening based off of your policies, things like that.
Yeah, when um there's a couple different ways, I guess, when I think about detection for insider threats, and there's a ton of different vendors that have their own POVs and their own perspectives and how they do it, but I kind of like put it into these three groups, right? There's like you can do like the UEBA, right, of the world, the UEBA or UBA or whatever. And it's like you can establish a baseline. And then if somebody deviates from that baseline and they're starting to, Jeanette every day is looking in the marketing files, but now she's starting to peep into the sales, like that's a deviation. Like, why is she doing that? Right. So like there's that peer group kind of analysis, kind of understanding what normal looks like. But then there's also the other approach where it's like just combining behaviors, right? And that is like is this risky? Is a certain kind of discrete event risky? And regardless of whoever that person did it, I'm going to alert on it. Like, is there like a better way? Like, is there, I don't know, is there a better way to do it one versus the other? Should we have like a multi-layered attack? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, ideally in security, right, you always want to have something where it's like defense in depth. I mean, the reality is, especially when you're thinking about your coworkers, you want to inherently, imagine that there's good intent. Maybe somebody is just working on a project for a different team rather than actually looking into something that they probably shouldn't be, or things like that. And
Yeah.
so it kind of comes down where you might want to have either types of like smart groups or criticality lists based off of the employees and what type of access that they have.
Mhm.
Things like your super admins, you might want to have separate monitoring, right? Just the idea to see, okay, well, not even that they might necessarily do something wrong, but if their account gets compromised, it's at a higher risk level of what they could be able to access and spread out. And so having those baseline detections and then having whether it's, user-based analytics or like a detection engine or something like that that's running off of it as well to draw like correlations. So
Mhm.
maybe it's like okay, well, this person is now going to these file serves, which is not usual behavior based off of user-based analytics, and then they're going and trying to upload them in a different location or emailing externally. And so being able to kind of put the entire picture together would be ideal.
I think that's spot on. Defense in depth, layered defenses. If you have like a new BA, that's great, but really just combining it all, combining behavioral indicators upon users or upon a cloud account or upon a cloud resource like in correlation, I think that's going to be key. But I from the statistics, it seems like when we think about the motive, right, for a lot of these insider threats, it seems that it could be kind of a wide range,
Yeah.
right? It's financial motivations, personal benefit, it's revenge, it's sabotage, it's reputation. It seems like in 2024, the biggest one well continues to be financially, which no surprise there. But the personal benefit though is up was up 50% from 2019. Now, and that's like should we be like putting a little bit more of a focus because where my mind thought about this is like mental health, right?
Yeah.
If you're growing the number of disgruntled employees in the business, they're probably going to start thinking, oh, how what can I do?
No, completely right. So it goes down to a couple of different things. So I mentioned a little bit where it gets harder to detect because of the remote office, remote work policies that a lot of organizations have, which can be an amazing thing. I love working remotely, but it can also make it harder to detect on like IPs and where somebody's working from regularly. But the other thing
Yeah.
with that, especially when it comes to like mental health and the idea of being a little bit more disgruntled, if you look at the kind of the landscape of organizations, if we even going back to say 2020, we're looking at kind of historic waves of layoffs within tech happening almost every
Oh
year.
my gosh, that's so true.
So, not only does that kind of make somebody feel uneasy, right, where they want to kind of either protect something, there's also a sense of ownership that a lot of people get when they create a document or a policy. And so they might inherently want to have a copy of that to take to them to their new job. And they might not necessarily feel bad about it or really think, a second thought about it because in their minds, again, being that like kind of disgruntled aspect when it comes to the organization, caring more about the bottom line than the employee and things like that. So it's not surprising that we're seeing an uptick on that. I think that kind of comes down to organizations need to figure out how to best support their employees rather than just saying, like here's a EAP or something that, somebody can sign up for that seemingly every company has and really isn't that special.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And but it's hard from a management
Yeah.
perspective. Like it's hard to measure how if someone's disgruntled or not. So it's just I mean it's just a matter of like just be a kind person, like be give separate the work, at a fair amount, really be clear about the job description, the roles, like and not expect so much out of one person. But it's hard. I guess it's hard to gauge whether someone's turning disgruntled or not. Should we be sending out surveys? Like how do we keep someone happy at their job?
Right. It's hard, right? Because the idea of surveys is then you have to count on somebody being vulnerable and being able to say everything. And so I think a lot of that does come down on management. One of the things of working remotely, we've gotten very used to being able to respond to whether it's Slack messages or team messages at all hours of the day, emails at all hours of the days, and not really having a great work-life balance and things like that. And so I think that's something that's going to come down from the individual organization and managers to make sure that they're kind of looking at their employees and their team members as a whole person, not as somebody who can just push out a policy or look at an alert, and making sure that you have appropriate coverage. If you have an on-call roster for incident or something like that for hour nights, make sure that people aren't taking too many shifts, things like that.
Yeah, and I gotta give a shout out to as it relates to mental health awareness and cyber. There's organizations like Mind Over Cyber who are providing a lot of incredible resources to really keep your cool and really learn how to balance that work life balance in specifically in the cybersecurity world. Because boy, does it can is the pressure packed on, and particularly even more in the cyberspace. And so they're definitely lean into resources like that and just be super transparent with management about it. And yeah, especially because these shifts are what, 24/7. It would is your SOC like a 24/7 operation?
Yeah, yeah. Typically, I work in either internally 24/7 or hybrid, where I have some direct SOC analysts and then MSSP services to kind of fill in the gaps. But
Mhm.
yeah, burnout in cyber is something that's always been traditionally very high for our industry. And so that's something that, working with Mind Over Cyber or other options out there is really important.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Should we, well, last thing I guess that comes to mind before we pull up the anonymous submissions and expose them is you mentioned earlier how, your spidey senses, like sometimes you just have like this something
Yeah.
to start trailing after and it just comes to you naturally. But how do you build that from a novice or like someone who's just starting out to really be curious and start to see, hey, there's something kind of off here.
Yeah, it's hard because some of that just comes with experience from, you get used to seeing what might be normal and whatnot. Some of it's also just natural curiosity and also having the right people kind of in your court, whether it's managers or other mentors that are helping encourage you to get out there and take a look at different things. One of the cases that a good friend of mine worked on years ago was an insider threat case where an engineer who had no connection with security at all sent him a message. It was like, hey, I noticed this person's timestamps are in it, like just a weird time zone, and then led to a full investigation to find out that the employee in question was outsourcing their work to somebody in China and doing the duo pushes for him and everything, and things like that, where he was
Oh
just
my
that
God.
employee was just looking for a way to essentially get a paycheck without having to do things, paying like a portion of their salary and just reaping the rest of it. And so that's something where it's like the spidey senses, where like somebody was just like, hey, this might be nothing, but like don't be afraid to just look into things.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Yeah.
And even from a detection standpoint, like we can lean so much on some machine learning models, like first time occurrences. Like, oh, if Jeanette never ever talks to, this person, and all of a sudden they're starting to have communication with this person in this IP in this country that we don't do business with, like, okay, that should ring some bells.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just also like encouraging people or not, discouraging them from reporting. How many times do we have people who are reporting phishing emails that might be perfectly legitimate? And while it might get annoying sometimes if you're looking at a lot of them, I'd rather have them report things that are legitimate and then just be able to correct, because then they're at least being a little bit more cyber aware than
Mhm.
feeling embarrassed or feeling like they shouldn't have to and then not reporting something that is legitimate and just kind of clicking it or moving forward.
That's such a good point. There's someone that, Jeanette just reminded me, there's a question in the chat from
Yeah.
Colin O'Rourke who said that, talking about disgruntled employees, when we were talking about that, says, should we be working with legal or HR teams as a part of an insider threat program to identify these high risk and disgruntled employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ideally, right, with any type of SOC, have run books or playbooks, whether it's based off of alerts or things like that. And so, say, for example, you find an employee doing something that's like potentially illegal, then absolutely, you would really literally want that called out within the flow chart of your run book of
Mhm.
engaging your employee relations team or your legal counterpart, whoever makes the most sense within your organization.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. And having that really, close collaboration, cross-functional across different business departments to really keep tabs on this. That's such a good point. That was a great question. All right, should we pull up the anonymous submissions?
Let's do it.
All right. So the very first one that we're going to talk about is, let's see, the abuse. Here. Okay. So, Alex, a government agency employed a contractor. So this is a contractor one, as a systems administrator who was responsible for monitoring critical system servers. Shortly, would I hire a contractor for a critical system? I don't know. Shortly after the contractor started, the organization reprimanded him for frequent tardiness, absences, unavailability. His supervisor reportedly warned him that his poor performance is very much a cause for dismissal. The contractor sent threatening and insulting messages to the organization. This behavior continued for about 2 weeks and during work hours. The contractor had root access to one server and no root access to another one, but using his privileged account, he created a file that enabled him to access that second server. Once the insider was inside of the second server, the contractor inserted malicious code that would delete all of the organization's files when the total data volume reached a certain point to conceal his activity and delete his logging. The malicious code disabled logging, removed history files, and removed all traces of that malicious code after its execution. After the contractor was terminated, he repeatedly contacted the organization's systems administrators to ask if the machines and the servers were functioning properly, which obviously aroused some suspicion there. The organization discovered the malicious code, shut down the systems, removed the code, restored the system's integrity, and the contractor did not succeed in deleting the data. However, but has since then the previous employer notified his next employer of what happened. So contractors here. I mean, I think it starts there. I mean, would you trust a contractor with a critical server?
I mean, especially considering it's government, there's a ton of contractors within the government. I used to be a contractor within the government a long time ago. So that's not super surprising. Obviously, not super ideal. But yeah, that's not surprising at all.
Yeah, I mean that raises concerns for me there. Also, I mean, this even gets into what is that program? It's like really really vetting someone before like a background check. What is that program called when you do like a background check before you hire somebody?
Right. I guess there's a couple different ones depending on what level of the government, like in what they were working on. Did they have a clearance or something like that, where they have to go through, interviews and have something like a top secret or even like public trust clearance or whatnot. I think some of the things that were kind of stuck out to me from the story was that this person's already, after being newly hired, having issues with tardiness and then sending threatening emails, and the fact that they let it go on for a couple
Okay,
of
that's
weeks.
true.
Like that absolutely should have been shot down pretty immediately. If I have somebody who, without, being a relatively new employee, is kind of constantly late, and then the second that they start threatening emails on that day one, everything's getting terminated. I don't really care on that one. That's just creating like a hostile work environment. And so the fact that it was allowed to go on for 2 weeks afterwards was pretty surprising. And especially too when you have somebody at that critical level, that's where you really want to make sure that you have some offsite-esque logs, whether it's just in another cloud account or something like that. And the idea that, for example, one of the things I've seen when it comes to like log deletion is I've seen people use like a multi-part password where it's a collaboration between two separate teams where each team only has half of the password. And so that way, at no point in
Oh,
time can any
wow.
one person just say like, YOLO, we're just deleting everything and going. And so it's the idea of having that kind of checks and balances. So it's more so that they should have just had some better checks and balances, should have had proper logging to see that that person was creating a backdoor on the other server and to be able to alert on it much, much faster than they did.
That's such a good point. I mean, like why didn't they have something in place, like the proper logging to say, hey, there's been a sign-in on the second server? Like
Mhm.
check,
Right.
validate the
Something that
signing, the person. Like how did that get missed?
Right. So having those separate types of detections. And again, just the fact of letting somebody who's sending threatening emails, like knowing too, like it's the story didn't say like, oh, we started getting anonymous, threats or something like that, saying that it was directly from that employee.
Mhm.
Absolutely would not fly in any environment that I run.
Yeah, no way. Alrighty. Second submission. This one is so another government employee. Why is it always the government? Like, shouldn't they have clearances? Like,
I
those
plead the
clearances
fifth
are
on
hard.
that one.
So the government agency employed the insider as a lead software engineer. And the insider led a team that was developing a software suite. After major issues were found during the first implementation, the agency requested that the insider document all of the source code and implement configuration management and central control of the development process. The insider later learned that the organization was planning to outsource the future like development of the suite, demote her, reduce her pay, and move her to another office. So basically, kind of like slow quitting. Has anyone ever heard of that? It's like trying to force you to slow quit.
Yeah.
While the project was still under the insider's control, she learned about this ahead of time. And so intentionally, she wrote the code in an obscure way to undermine the project's transition. The insider filed a grievance and then took a leave of absence. The organization denied the grievance, and the insider then resigned. Prior to resigning, the insider copied all of the source code to a removable media, encrypted it with a password. The insider then deleted the source code from her laptop, which she turned in when she resigned. She explained that she intentionally deleted the source code as part of wiping her laptop before turning it in, but she did not disclose that she retained a copy of it, the source code in a removable media. The organization discovered that she deleted the only known copy of the source code for the system, a safety-related system being used in production at the time. The system executable continued to function, but because of the missing source code, the organization was unable to fix bugs, make enhancements, and continue operating their e-commerce part of the job. Investigators eventually discovered the encrypted copy of the software in the insider's home after 9 months. They officially admitted her to crime, provided the cryptographic key to unencrypt the software. She was arrested and convicted of imprisonment in order to pay $15,000 in fine, and is now in white-collar jail still.
I mean, I guess first, why would you only ever, especially if it's like a safety system or prod, why would you only ever have one code base? Like there's the idea of backup and recovery for a reason. And so that's kind of first. And then second, similarly, why wouldn't you have either your EDR solution looking at what's going to removable media and alerting off of that, or ideally just blocking USBs? I mean, I might be naive here. I really don't know the last time I used a USB. I don't know many people who actively do right now, but I'm sure there are some. But a lot of times, if anything, you just put code either on like a file share or a Google Drive or something like that. And so, yeah, if your organization can just block removable media and just mitigate that, and then make sure that you have proper logging in place on large uploads.
So, Rebecca, last time I went to get my Illinois driver's license, I'm pretty sure I saw Windows Vista on their system. Like I kind of sure of it. Like they have, and maybe it's not connected to the internet. I'll give them that. But like I don't know. I think they have very older systems, especially in the government.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's back when I worked in as a government contractor, unfortunately, it wasn't super uncommon to see like Windows XP systems.
Yeah.
We definitely weren't in the times of Windows XP, it was very much a lot of things that are outdated, and so a lot of that is just kind of coming down to the environments need to be a little bit better at upgrading their systems and making sure that they have proper protections in place.
Yeah, and that's also a good point too. The like, why is that their only copy of the source code? Like, are they not
100%.
using like Jenkins or like I don't know. It seems very old. It seems very old school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any identity play here for like from a detection standpoint?
I mean, with this one specifically, because it's, again, the idea of like the quiet quitting and stuff like that, you could have some user-based analytics. Obviously, you're probably not going to detect on anything of like how they wrote the code.
Mhm.
But the detection would be more off of the copying of the source code to the removable media, and that's where it would really come into play.
Yeah, and you, yeah, no, that's true. And even I was gonna say maybe it's like a network, like bytes transfer play there. But if it's everything is onto a removable media, I mean, I don't think you can track if it like goes over the wire.
No, after that you can. I mean, if it got, uploaded online and they hadn't changed anything, then you could track the hash potentially.
Yeah.
But it would be more of like comparing the hash of those files to the known hash that you have of the source code. But also, if they don't have the source code anymore, then they probably don't have the hash. So
Yeah. And then on last note on the removable media, like I'm pretty sure it's banned. I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. At Amlogic, I think it's banned to have USB drives. I'm not quite sure, but it also is that a security problem or is that more of like an IT problem? Like just to not have it, not have it enabled at all
I
because
mean,
even if
yeah.
I put it in there, it won't work. Like I feel like it doesn't even work. So is that an IT or is that a SecOps issue?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, SecOps and IT need to work very closely together on a multitude of issues, things like removable media or admin access on laptops or things like that. And so it might be on IT to initially implement the block, but then if there are any, exceptions to that or any of like the monitoring aspect, that should be more on the SecOps side.
Jeanette, like we're gonna cut that video, like that clip of her saying saying that, that's gonna like rattle the world. IT and SecOps need to work closer together. Okay. Last one is looks like it's, oh, this one is called Project Revenge.
So dramatic.
I know. Hold on. Is it this one? No. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. An e-commerce company employed, okay, so not government this time. An e-commerce company employed a chief project engineer, which was the insider, by the way. The organization removed her. Why are these all hers, by the way? Like, the organization removed her from a major project and subsequently terminated her employment. Afterwards, her accomplice, an employee of the victim organization, allegedly gave her the password to the server storing the project that they had worked on together. According to some sources, she wanted to delete the project file for revenge. The other sources claim that she wanted to hide the file during a presentation just so that her accomplice could recover the file, appeared to be the hero, and then avoid being fired. So they were like trying to help each other out, like trying to stage something. She did delete the file, but the organization was able to recover the lost data. The project was valued at $2.6 million, and the insider and her accomplice were arrested, even though it didn't necessarily like do any damage to the company per se, but that whole act was just uncalled for. But it was just to save your friend from getting fired. It's like, oh wow, like you love your coworker so much,
Yeah.
you don't want her to be fired, so you're gonna stage this whole like cybersecurity thing. Like,
Yeah, it's absolutely the epitome of people doing the most. And so some of the areas that could have happened when it comes to detection is looking at the password sharing. So was there something where, a keeper or a LastPass or any type of password management solution was used at the organizational level? Because then you can manage when it gets shared out externally. You can't really stop anything if somebody's going to physically like write down a password and then like pass it on that sticky note or text it to somebody else. But then the other area that you could look at would be then looking at like the login, because if that person who was fired is logging in, then they're obviously not going to be coming from like a company VPN or a company IP. And so that's just managing like your security group rules if it's something in the cloud, or having just monitoring setup of where somebody is logging in from.
yeah, no, absolutely. Isn't that like the tale as old as time, the impossible travel rule?
Yeah, that's one that's always going to be on there for sure.
Yeah. And then also like first time occurrences, first time I see someone logging in from this IP, like is that normal? That's tale as old as time, I feel like. But man, I gotta give it to her. Like find a friend that will care about you that much, but not, I guess not to go to jail.
Yeah, I can't really imagine doing that for anyone. Because you have to, I guess there's some area where you just have to be very naive to think that it's not going to get figured out and not think about it from that way. But I mean, if they want to just put the effort into doing the work correctly rather than trying to look like a fake hero or something like that, then it probably would have worked out better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And shared accounts, I feel like this is something I'm constantly
Yeah.
I'm torn about. Like some people will say that shared accounts are some in some cases are very necessary for like a service account or for something that like more than 2 or 3 people need visibility on. But it should, I mean, is it really a best practice?
No, it's definitely not a best practice by any means. I mean, showing the government side a little bit, unfortunately, there's this thing called disastigs out there. And so there's specifically the idea of creating separate accounts when it comes to admin, regular user service accounts and things like that. So it'd be like Rebecca Blair.sa or something. And so just for both monitoring purposes, but if possible, right, the idea that you just have people who have, even if it's just their account, that they're only using their account for those types of accesses rather than a service account. The other thing that we have seen, or I've definitely seen, would be like shared mailboxes, but especially now, especially if you're using like a cloud exchange server, a lot of times you can just set up like whether it be a Google group or something like that. And
Right.
so it might be an email to, help@ambilogic.com where it's a shared mail service, but everybody within that group can then have access to respond from that. And so I think we're putting enough different technical resources into it, where ideally I'd love to see shared accounts go away.
They should be canceled. They should be canceled. It's so easy for all the Gen Z to cancel, the next celebrity for responding a certain way. Like, let's cancel shared accounts. Like, but
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
were it. There were a couple honorable mentions, but I think those were pretty horrible for now. So I had a lot of fun diving into these with you. I do want to open it up to the chat, or if anybody has any questions for Rebecca today in the audience. We've got 16 people live that joined. This is your time to ask Rebecca any insider best practices or any questions really, that you may have.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And then if you also think of anything after this, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or anything like that, and always happy to answer.
Any questions? We could ask Jeanette's signature question. Rebecca, what would you say you love the most about the security ops community?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's the knowledge sharing. It's really interesting. I was talking to somebody earlier this week who is trying to make the transition from IT to security in general, and just kind of talking about all the different open source resources that are out there, whether it be podcast, blogs, different exercises and labs online. And so the idea that we're trying to kind of get away from gatekeeping. I know that's been an issue with security in the past,
100%.
but I think we're going to a little bit more of an open and information sharing kind of community. And so it's really great to see that transition.
Oh, I'm 100% with you on there. That's the whole motto of Dispatch, is to cultivate information sharing. Like, stop trying to gatekeep everything. I know there's some things people want to be taboo about, but not when it comes to how we can all get better as an industry. That shouldn't be so taboo.
Mhm.
Yeah. And is there anything you want to see more of in the SecOps community?
No, I just think like the continued evolution, right? So looking at different types of detections when it comes to AI and things like that. And so seeing kind of SecOps in general continue to kind of keep up with changing technology, and trying to figure out new solutions, whether it's finding a better hybrid model or decentralized security posture or something like that. So just really excited to see the innovation that can come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like no questions were in the chat. But if you guys do come up with anything, you can join our Discord community to keep the conversations going there. We'll put the link in the chat to join our server there. And Rebecca, I can't thank you enough for all of the collaboration we've had together with you and Anvologic, and we just wish you so much continued success and where you go with your career. And thank you for everyone for tuning in, and for getting some live from herself, some best practices on how to deal with all of these different insider threat horror stories. Also, don't forget to sign up in the Google Drive for Rebecca's book to just get more intel on the MITRE attack and aligning your security operations to the MITRE attack framework. And so until the next time, I hope everyone stays safe and secure from insider threats. And join us definitely next month for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We're going to do a weekly lineup of content every single month for the entire month of October. They're not going to be live. We're recording all of that ahead of time, but you will get an episode every single week, and you'll be notified about it every single Thursday to check out the episode. We're going to probably communicate all of that through Discord. So excited to stay in close contact with you guys on there.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you feel better, and everybody will see you all in November for another live episode.